Hi, and welcome to the Cult of Crafting. In celebration of Orktober and Halloween, today I'll show you how I painted this wonderful model, Bruce Payne, from Puppetswar Miniatures. He's an orc dressed like some kind of Batman. You know, a Night Lord. I started by priming the miniature black, and that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Oh, you want a little more detail? Well, okay then. Let's start by blocking in some colors. I'll start with Incupied Darkness. I'll apply it to the cape and his clothes, leaving a little black in the recesses. I imagine his origin story is that as a young git, he watched his warboss and weird boy getting killed by the Night Lords, and he thought that was bloody hilarious. So he decided to imitate the Night Lords and wear a mask and cape. In true Chaos style, I want some of the metallic parts to be brass colored. And I'll use Rhinox hide as a base color for the metallics I'll apply later. Throughout this video you'll see me going back and forth between different areas of the model, and you might ask yourself, well, why doesn't he just finish that in one go? And the answer is that if I keep moving around the model, I won't have to wait for the paint to dry before proceeding to the next step. It'll dry while I'm painting something else. The base color for the skin will be Skarsnik Green. It's a lot more vibrant than the colors I've used so far, and hopefully that will help draw attention to the face. For the inside of the cape, I chose a muted red P3 Sanguine highlight. I picked up the first off-white color I found to paint the teeth and the inside of the mouth. For the metallic parts, I chose Brassy Brass by Vallejo Model Color Air. The wristbands I painted in Waaagh Flesh. For orcs, I usually use Druchii Violet for the insides of their mouths. The pouches I'll paint using Steel Legion Drab. The grenades I'll paint green with Waaagh Flesh. So far so good. I'm pretty happy with how the initial colors look, except for maybe the weapons. I might do something else with them later on. Next I'll continue working on the cape. I think this Thunderhawk blue will work. Essentially I'm just going over the same areas as I did before, but applying the Thunderhawk blue to a smaller area, leaving some of the black and the darker blue in the recesses. Next I'll mix Thunderhawk Blue with Incupied Darkness and apply it as a transition between those two colors. Then I'll mix Incupied Darkness with a little black and do the same thing I did before to make a smoother transition in the shadows. At this point I'm going back and forth between the different shades of blue, adjusting the shadows and the highlights. I haven't painted like this for a long time. It might have been as much as 10 years since I last did layering and edge highlights. For the last couple of years I've mainly painted armies, where my focus has been on getting the miniatures ready for battle as fast as possible, so I felt I needed to challenge myself a bit. When I started painting my orcs a few years ago, I mixed up a couple of washes for the skin color, and cleverly I wrote the recipe on the pot. Unfortunately, it faded in time. I think it's a mix between Biel-Tan Green and Army Painter Military Shader. While giving the grenades a second coat of Waaagh Flesh, I wet blended with some Skarsnik Green to create a highlight. I'll use Agrax Earthshade on the small leather pouches and the wristbands. I'll also use it on the weapons to see what the effect is on the brass collar. For edge highlights on the cape, I'll use Vallejo Model Air Pale Blue, and I'll use it to highlight most of the sharp edges. Next I'll give the teeth a layer of Wraithbone. I'll also paint the eyes white so we can make a glowing effect later on. Once the paint is dry, I give the teeth a wash of Agrax Earthshade. Then I paint the top 2/3 of the teeth with Wraithbone again. And finally I use pure white to paint the top third of the teeth. I'll also use the pure white to highlight the most prominent edges. The back of the cape looks pretty good to me, but I feel I went a little overboard with the highlights on the front of the cape. There's just too much going on and I want the focus to be on the face, so I'll go in with some of the darker colors and dull down the highlights. At this point I felt that the brass was a little overwhelming, so I painted the kneecaps blue and decided to paint the weapons gunmetal instead. Instead of using Agrax Earth Shade for the rest of the brass, I decided to use Raglan Flesh Shade instead because I wanted it to look more reddish. To create the glow effect for the eyes, I'll use this fluorescent paint from scale 75. I'll dilute it a bit, and then I'll apply it to the eyes and the areas around the eyes. Once it's dry, I go back in and make a white dot in the center of the eyes, and then I go over it again with the diluted fluorescent paint. And that's it for the eyes. To highlight the brass, I'll use Vallejo Bright Brass. Before proceeding to the next step, I gave the Mini a coat of matte varnish so it wouldn't look so shiny. I applied the varnish now because it would interfere with the following steps if I did it after. I still wasn't satisfied with the weapons, so as a final touch I'll use my favorite effect paint, Rust by Dirty Down. After that's dried, I'll go in with pure water to reactivate it to get some color variance. And finally I stippled on some gunmetal. And that's it for this video. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Happy Halloween!